Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. House Speaker Mike Johnson defends his decision to bring up a bill for a vote that provides $14 billion for Israel for its war against Hamas, but no money for Ukraine or other emergency national security priorities requested by President Joe Biden, and includes $14 billion in cuts to the IRS budget. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is flying back to Israel, reportedly to ask the Israeli government to take a series of breaks in its military operations in Gaza to allow for hostages to be released and humanitarian aid to flow into the Palestinians. The U.S. Senate confirms leaders for the Air Force and Navy filling the last two open spots on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But hundreds more military nominations and promotions are still being held up by Senator Tommy Tuberville, who is protesting the Pentagon's policy on a service member's travel to obtain an abortion. And now some of his fellow Senate Republicans want him to end the blockade and are confronting him publicly. House resolutions to expel Republican Congressman George Santos and censure Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib both fail, with bipartisan votes against each. And Social Security Commissioner nominee Martin O'Malley gets a Senate Finance Committee confirmation hearing promising to improve customer service at the agency. And we start with the U.S. House taking up a bill titled the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Bill, $14.3 billion in security aid to Israel, including for missile defense, artillery, and munitions. The bill also rescinds an equal amount from the IRS budget. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference explained why he's bringing it up.
While House Republicans are leading on approps, we're also leading the charge to support our cherished friend. And last week, in one of my first acts as Speaker, we passed a resolution reaffirming our commitment to Israel in its moment of peril. And now, as Israel begins the next phase of its war, it's been kind of disturbing to us. I've heard Democrats suggest that there needs to be a ceasefire. Let us be clear. We've been very clear about this. There was a ceasefire. It was before October 7th, and Hamas broke it. And Israelis suffered unspeakable acts of evil, as you've heard even recounted here this morning. Israel doesn't need a ceasefire. It needs its allies to cease with the politics and deliver support now. And that's what we're doing. House Republicans plan to do that. We're going to do it in short order, and it provides Israel the aid it needs to defend itself, free its hostages, and eradicate Hamas, which is a mission that must be accomplished.
House Speaker Mike Johnson at a news conference. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has spoken out against the bill that the House is voting on to provide aid to Israel, but also cut the IRS budget, and President Biden has threatened to veto. They object to that IRS rescission and that the $14.3 billion for Israel is a standalone bill and will not include the full request from President Biden of $106 billion for Israel, Ukraine, Indo-Pacific nation security, and to address migrant-related activities at the U.S.-Mexico border. Speaker Johnson was asked about this today.
On just Israel, I want to nail you down on that. On Ukraine, you're just saying you will not pass Israel aid bill unless it's offset. Is that the correct interpretation of your comments?
That's what we're going to do, and the reason for that
But I'm saying
is,
when it comes back from the Senate, that's your...
Look, right. We're their decision they have to make on their own, but our decision is, look, the reason we pulled it from the Israel fund is that's a pile of money, $67 billion that's sitting over there to refurbish, build up, and hire new IRS agents and the rest. If you have to look at the scope and the importance of our commitments right now, my belief is that this dire situation in Israel is so important that it's more immediate than that. And if Democrats in the Senate or the House or anywhere else want to argue that hiring more IRS agents is more important than standing with Israel in this moment, I'm ready to have that debate. But I did not attach that for political purposes, okay? I attached it because, again, we're trying to get back to the principle of fiscal responsibility here. And that was the easiest and largest pile of money that's sitting there for us to be able to pay for this immediate obligation. And so we're going to stand for that, and I'm going to continue to message that to the American people. And you know what? I suspect they're with us on it.
And on Ukraine, just how do you intend to handle that?
Ukraine will come in short order. It will come next, and you've heard me say that we want to pair border security with Ukraine because I think we could get bipartisan agreement on both of those matters. Look, the American people feel very strongly about this, and I do as well, and I can tell you House Republicans do. We have obligations, and we have things that we can and should do around the world, but we have to take care of our own house first. And as long as the border's wide open, we're opening ourselves up for great threat. And again, it's just a matter of principle that if we're going to take care of a border in Ukraine, we need to take care of America's border as well. And I think there's bipartisan support for that idea.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, with reporters today. Later, during the House floor debate on the bill that he was bringing up, again, money for Israel and the cuts to the IRS budget, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, spoke in opposition.
We live with deepening crises around the world, and America's leadership is being challenged like at no other juncture in our history. And you can be sure Putin is watching, Ayatollah Khamenei is watching. Are they going to see a united and a strong America that shows why we are admired and why we are exceptional? This Congress is called to respond to the crises in Ukraine, Israel, the Indo-Pacific, here at home and on our border. And I hoped we would be debating a bill that rose to the seriousness of these crises without delay. But this bill fails Israel. And this bill fails the 1,400 Israelis and 36 Americans who were slaughtered in their homes and on the streets in cold blood. Those brutal massacres were called the Holocaust. This is a Holocaust, a different kind of massacre, and demanded that Israel act against Hamas with the support of the United States. But what the House Republicans have done is unprecedented and will mean any aid to Israel will be delayed. First, it puts a poisoned partisan bill that removes funding to ensure the richest Americans and corporations pay taxes. It is supposedly paid for with cuts to the IRS of $14.3 billion, which the CBO says will nearly double the cost of this bill and add $12 billion to the deficit. It furthers the Republican goal of keeping billionaires and the big corporations from paying taxes. Second, it is conditioning an emergency appropriation. We do not condition emergency appropriations. Understand, this is the first time we have conditioned aid to Israel. Is Israel less important than other national emergencies? Is Israel just a budget line? Is it just more fodder for the partisan wars that polarize America? It is outrageous that a major emergency funding bill in response to the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust is tied to offsets. Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East, is reeling from a terrorist attack and urgently needs our support. This bill tells our allies that should they find themselves in an existential war for their democracy and their freedom, we will not put aside our partisan wars. This bill abandons Ukraine. We will not abandon Israel, and we will not abandon Ukraine. But their fortunes are linked. Ukraine's fight for democracy and sovereignty requires decisive action and absolute support from the free world. We must act like the leaders of the free world.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. The House passed this bill by a vote of 226 to 196, mostly party line. 12 Democrats voted yes, 2 Republicans voted no. The bill now heads to the Senate. President Joe Biden said today that 74 American citizens with dual nationality are among those evacuated so far from the Gaza Strip to Egypt as the war between Hamas and Israel goes on. But hundreds, perhaps thousands more want to leave. The New York Times reports that Secretary of State Anthony J. Blinken will urge the Israeli government to agree to a series of brief cessations of military operations in Gaza to allow for hostages to be released safely and for humanitarian aid to be distributed, White House officials said on Thursday. The message comes as President Biden revealed on Wednesday that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel had previously agreed to halt shelling briefly on October 20th to allow for the release of 2 Americans. White House officials said the request for pauses was far different from an overall ceasefire, which the Biden administration believes would benefit Hamas by allowing it to recover from Israel's intense bombardment. That from the New York Times. Secretary Blinken spoke with reporters on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland before flying to Israel.
We are heading back to the Middle East, heading to Israel, heading to Jordan, with three principal goals in mind. First, to talk to the Israeli government about the ongoing campaign against the Hamas terrorist organization. As we've said from the start, Israel has not only the right but the obligation to defend itself and also to take steps to try to make sure that this never happens again. We've also said very clearly and repeatedly that how Israel does this matters. We will focus as well on steps that need to be taken to protect civilians who are in a crossfire of Hamas's making. And we want to look at concrete steps that can be taken to better protect them. We've seen in recent days Palestinian civilians continuing to bear the brunt of this action, and it's important, and the United States is committed to making sure everything possible is done to protect civilians. At the same time, we're determined that this conflict not spread, and we'll be talking to both the Israeli government and partners in the region about what all of us are doing to prevent that from happening. Second big objective, of course, is to continue our efforts to get humanitarian assistance in and to get our citizens and nationals out of Gaza. In terms of humanitarian assistance going in, we've been able to establish over the last couple of weeks efforts to get trucks moving. We've had about 50 to 60 trucks a day of assistance going in. We need that and want that to increase, and I expect you'll see that in the coming days. At the same time, we've been working to make sure that our nationals and other foreign nationals can get out. And over the last 2 days, you've seen Americans and their families begin to come out of Gaza. And we expect that to continue over the coming days. This has been a very deliberate effort on our part, working with other countries to make sure we could get passage out for our citizens and citizens from other countries. Of course, we're intensely focused every single day on the hostages and taking every possible step that we can in concert with others to secure their release. Third and finally, we will be talking about how we can set the conditions for a durable, sustainable peace, durable, sustainable security for Israelis and Palestinians alike.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken at the airport in Maryland, talking to reporters before flying off to Israel. He also mentioned that he plans to visit Jordan. Yesterday, Jordan withdrew its ambassador to Israel and said it would not permit Israel's ambassador to Jordan to re-enter the country in protest of Israel's attacks on Gaza. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, writes Reuters, on Thursday sought to reassure Asian countries that the U.S. approach to China will not lead to a disastrous division of the global economy that would force them to take sides. In a speech ahead of the U.S.-hosted Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, or APEC, in San Francisco later this month, Secretary Yellen said that a full decoupling of the U.S. and Chinese economies was simply not practical, especially given the complexity of Asian supply chains and deep economic linkages to China in the region. That was reporting from Reuters. Here's Secretary Yellen today in Washington.
We know the U.S.-China relationships is among the most consequential in the world, and we need to get it right for Americans and for people around the world, including across the Indo-Pacific. That begins with a serious, clear-eyed economic approach. As I've said, the United States does not seek to decouple from China. A full separation of our economies, or an approach in which countries, including those in the Indo-Pacific, are forced to take sides, would have significant negative global repercussions. We have no interest in such a divided world and its disastrous effects. And given the extent of economic linkages within the Indo-Pacific region and the complexity of global supply chains, it's also simply not practical. Instead, we are de-risking and diversifying by investing at home and strengthening linkages with allies and partners around the world.
The Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen at the Asia Society Policy Institute meeting in Washington, D.C. The White House said earlier this week that President Joe Biden will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC, or Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco, scheduled for later this month. President Biden held separate meetings today in the White House Oval Office with the presidents of the Dominican Republic and Chile. This is Washington Today. The Joint Chiefs of Staff no longer has any vacancies for the first time since July, after 2 nominees were confirmed by the Senate today. General David Alvin to be Air Force Chief of Staff and Admiral Lisa Franchetti to be Chief of Naval Operations. Both votes were 95-1. The one no vote, Senator Roger Marshall, Republican from Kansas. Senate also confirmed Lieutenant General Christopher Mahoney to be General and Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, the number 2 post under General Eric Smith, who has been in the hospital since last weekend with a health emergency. The vote for the Lieutenant General Christopher Mahoney was 86-0 in the Senate. And this from ABC News. They write, Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville said Thursday that he is not backing down after his fiery battle with Republican colleagues on the Senate floor over his unprecedented move to hold up hundreds of military nominations and promotions. Senate Republicans, led by Senators Dan Sullivan and Joni Ernst, on Wednesday night angrily challenged Senator Tuberville in an all-out Republican-on-Republican brawl on the floor, during which they held the floor for more than 4 hours as they repeatedly tried and repeatedly failed to get Senator Tuberville to cave on his military holds, his attempt to change Pentagon abortion policy. Republicans brought 61 military nominees up for individual consideration on the Senate floor Wednesday night. Senator Tuberville spiked every single one of them. That was from ABC News. Here is Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska, Wednesday night on the Senate floor.
Mr. President, we're going to start moving through some of these nominations. My colleague from Alabama has said publicly, hey, bring them up one at a time. And we're asking for a voice vote, so that's a vote. So we're doing what he said. Not sure why he's objecting. Maybe you can explain that in a minute when I bring up a real hero, by the way. And look, what Senator Tuberville said about the policy in Austin and Biden on this abortion policy, I fully agree with him. We should be suing to stop it. I think it's illegal. And he's also right. Everybody uses holds. I certainly use holds. But the key is you put a hold on someone who typically has some kind of control over the issue that you're trying to fix, some kind of responsibility. One of the things I've been talking to the senator from Alabama on is, all right, let's put a hold on the Undersecretary of Defense for policy. He's the guy. He's a civilian, and he's in charge of this policy dispute. Let's put a hold on him. That's the right guy, and squeeze him. But why are we putting holds on war heroes? I'm going to get to one here in a minute. Again, I don't understand. And look, we can go in and out of readiness, but my colleague from Alabama is 100% wrong. No kidding. The readiness is being impacted when you have, I'll just give a couple examples here. This is just from one theater, UCOM. The deputy chairman of NATO, pretty important job. It's a 3-star billet. It's empty. The deputy commanding general of U.S. Army Europe, really important job. Empty.
Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska, Wednesday night on the Senate floor as he and a few other Senate Republicans tried and failed to get the votes on the military nominations and promotions being held up by Senator Tuberville. Associated Press explains the Senate is currently at a stalemate on the nominations because Senator Tuberville is objecting to the routine process of confirming the nominations all at once by unanimous consent, and voting on them individually could monopolize weeks or months of the Senate's time. Today, Senator Tuberville told reporters that he will continue those holds. It's going on about 10 months now, until the Pentagon changes its policy on abortion. He says it gives service members time off and reimburses them for travel costs if they are stationed in states that restrict abortion access to go to other states to get those services. Senator Tuberville spoke with reporters in the hallway.
It's your Republican colleagues who say you're weakening the military.
Oh, really? Well,
Are
that's
you
their opinion.
Are you at risk of weakening the military?
No. As I've told you all along, if I thought there was any problem with readiness, we wouldn't be doing this. All jobs are filled. People are doing their jobs. This will be over one day. I don't know when. That was kind of interesting for me last night. But
those were some biting criticisms you got last night.
Yeah, it was a little character assassination at times. But you know, you got to remember what I did for a living for a long time, so I'm used to that. But we got to get all on the same page on this, and I think we will. It's just we went through something last night that, that's 17th time. 16 of them were Democrats, and now one Republican. But we'll work through it.
So has any of this caused you to change your approach?
No.
So you're not going to drop your holds no matter what?
No.
I mean,
not no matter what. And, you know, we get some resolution from the SecDef and the president. First of all, we don't even know what the policy is. They won't give it to us. We went through a briefing, and we got no definition of really what they changed it to. So they're kind of shooting from the hip. We need to sit down, talk about the policy, see if there's anything that we can agree on and get on with life.
But you heard each of these senators say one by one that these people, these military personnel, have nothing to do with the policy.
They don't have any.
So why hold them up?
But it's the only way I can get their attention. And I've told you all along, I hate to have to do this. But somebody has got to listen to us, okay? I work for the people of this country, okay? I don't work for another senator or president. I work for the taxpayers of this country. We polled everybody. 60% of Democrats and Republicans do not want to pay for abortion. They don't want their money to go to it. So this is not just a Republican issue. This is a taxpayer issue. So I'm standing up for the people of this country. I'm going to continue to do that. Hopefully we can get some kind of resolution.
Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama, speaking to reporters today on Capitol Hill. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor today spoke about Senator Tuberville's holds on the nominations, what happened on the Senate floor last night between Senator Tuberville and other Senate Republicans, and a resolution from the Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, that would allow a few hundred promotions to be confirmed in a single vote.
The Pentagon recently estimated that by the end of this year, up to 3/4 of the generals and admirals in the Defense Department will be affected by Senator Tuberville's reckless holds. Patience is wearing thin on both sides of the aisle over the senator's antics. Last night, a group of our Republican colleagues tried to confirm many of our military nominees by consent. For 4 hours, late into the evening, our colleagues moved from one nominee to the other, and the senator from Alabama brazenly stood there and objected to each one. Democrats and Republicans alike have tried to reason with the senator from Alabama, offering him one solution for compromise after the other, but every step he has refused to cooperate. So, 2 days ago, Chairman Reed of the Senate Armed Services Committee introduced a resolution that will allow the Senate to quickly confirm the nominees currently being blocked by the senator from Alabama. This resolution was referred to the Rules Committee, and when the time comes, I will bring it to the floor of the Senate for consideration. If we can't solve this problem another way, we will all have to vote to move these nominees forward.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor. At the Pentagon briefing, the Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks was asked about military readiness and the holds on promotions and nominations by Senator Tuberville.
On the holds, Senator Tuberville has said that his holds do not affect military readiness. He said that they don't add stress to the officers who have had to do 2 jobs at once. And I just wanted to ask, from your point of view, when you walk the halls, is that your experience? Has this not affected readiness? Have the officers been just fine filling 2 roles at the same time?
So we've said many times in the last 6+ months that the hold is unnecessary, unprecedented, and unsafe. and that it's bad for our military, it's bad for our military families, it's bad for the country. We have seen tragic effects of that stress, but in a day-to-day sense, we've also seen the stress at the individual human level. And I think that's been well communicated on Capitol Hill. We're pleased to see today Admiral Franchetti and General Alvin having already been confirmed. We understand General Mahoney will be confirmed, we very much hope, by the end of the day. But even then, you have 370, I think is the number, officers who've dedicated their lives to service to the nation. It's wrong, and it is unsafe, and it is absolutely hurting readiness.
Just a quick follow-up and then the AI. You say you've seen the tragic effects. Do you think that this added stress and workload may have contributed to General Smith's illness?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on my personal views on that. I will only say that General Smith has indicated that he's trying to work 2 jobs, that he's working from 6 a.m. to 11 at night. I think it speaks for itself.
Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Defense Secretary, at a news conference at the Pentagon. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source. On C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Congressman Anthony D'Esposito, Republican from New York, posted on X, formerly Twitter, Wednesday night, "I am disappointed my colleagues chose not to expel George Santos from Congress. I believe George Santos's lies, coupled with the criminal charges he is facing, deem Santos unfit to serve the people of New York's 3rd Congressional District." And in a second post, he said, "I'm confident the findings of the upcoming House Ethics Committee report on George Santos will expose Santos's deceptions and outline what New Yorkers already know, that George Santos is a fraud, unworthy of serving in public office." The resolution brought forward to expel Congressman George Santos, Republican from New York, failed in the House on a vote of 179 to 213, with 19 members voting present. 31 Democrats and 182 Republicans voted against the resolution. Congressman Nick LaLota, Republican from New York, a co-sponsor of the resolution, told reporters today that he too is optimistic that the next time this is brought up after the House Ethics Committee report on Congressman Santos, the vote will be different.
Do you mind stopping at the pool camera now, please?
Sure.
Do you think you'll bring up the Santos expulsion resolution again?
Yes, and I think that'll be, it's likely to be right after the Ethics Committee publishes their findings, which we've been told it's going to be on or before November 17th.
Do you think that there will be more support at that point from Republicans, the two-thirds majority?
Heck yeah. A lot of my colleagues had private conversations with, they wanted to hang their hat on something. They wanted to hang their hat on a guilty plea, a guilty finding of a jury or a judge, or an ethics committee finding. So I would expect the number of Republicans to increase from 24, like it was yesterday, and I expect the number of Democrat no's to decrease from 31 that was yesterday.
Why do you think Democrats voted to bail out Santos?
It's a great question for them, for you to ask them, but I would suspect that they love the politics of this. They love not talking about the border. They love not talking about the budget. They love talking about George Santos, and I think their political priorities are probably misaligned there.
Congressman Nick LaLota, Republican from New York, speaking to reporters today. Congressman Jamie Raskin, a Democrat from Maryland, defended his vote to keep Congressman Santos from being expelled by writing, "I'm a Constitution guy. The House has expelled 5 people in our history, 3 for joining the Confederacy as traitors to the Union, and 2 after they were convicted of serious criminal offenses. This would be a terrible precedent to set, expelling people who have not been convicted of a crime and without internal due process. If and when Santos is convicted of these serious criminal offenses or ethics charges, I will certainly vote to expel him." That from Congressman Raskin. And Congressman Santos himself posting a statement, "I will continue to fight for the principles and values that people of New York's 3rd District hold dear despite facing opposition and calls for my expulsion. I remain steadfast in my commitment to serve my constituents and upholding conservative ideals." Another House vote Wednesday night was on a resolution to censure Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Democrat from Michigan, over her criticism of Israel after Hamas's deadly attack and Israel's military response in Gaza. The resolution to censure Rashida Tlaib failed when 23 Republicans joined all Democrats in voting to table or kill the resolution. The censure resolution of Rashida Tlaib was offered by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, and Congresswoman Becca Balint, Democrat of Vermont, had introduced a separate resolution to censure Congresswoman Greene. But that was not voted on Wednesday night. And House Democratic Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar and Vice Chair Ted Lieu today were asked why.
Thank you. Why did the censure resolution against Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene not get a vote last night?
You could talk to the author of the motion, Becca Balint, but I believe our intention was to make sure that everybody in the chamber knows exactly what was happening with the politics on the other side. The fact that that they would offer resolutions and censures of our members is something that we didn't feel was right or accurate, and I appreciate that there were members on the other side who voted to table those measures. We don't always agree with each other in these chambers under this dome, but the actions that we take are meaningful, and so I think that was done in a spirit to kind of move on. We'll see what the future holds as these measures and as this extreme Republican majority continues, and we'll just hold out hope that we can work together and find some common ground.
Sure. There are preciously few days before a government shutdown, and we ask the Republican caucus to put bills on the floor that are going to help the American family and move us forward. And so the less amount of partisan games that they play, the better it will be for our country.
Congressman Ted Lieu, Democrat from California, and Congressman Pete Aguilar, Democrat from California, members of the House Democratic leadership at a news conference today. Becca Balint, the Democrat from Vermont, sponsor of that resolution that would censure Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia. She put out a statement after the resolution to censure Rashida Tlaib was tabled that reads, "I'm celebrating the fact that the truth prevailed about my friend and colleague, Rashida Tlaib, but we couldn't let one of our own be censured for something that is completely fabricated and racist. I was surprised when, on the floor, several Republicans voted with us to table the hateful and untruthful censure resolution that Congresswoman Greene brought against Congresswoman Tlaib. When 23 Republicans said no to Congresswoman Greene's bigotry, I saw the situation a little differently. I wanted to thank them for doing the right thing, and I'm going to hold back on the vote for now." That from Becca Balint. From Washington Examiner, this story, House Speaker Mike Johnson said that the final decision on whether or not to impeach President Joe Biden will be coming very soon. Here's the question and answer at the Speaker's news conference.
Get a timeline from you on your thoughts about impeachment. Chairman Comer has suggested that his investigation is winding down. Do you feel right now that there is enough evidence to move on articles of impeachment? And how quickly could we see that process play out? And if you've already decided that you're heading towards articles of impeachment, or is there more that you need to see?
So, many of you know my background. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I believe this is a very serious matter. I was called upon to serve on the impeachment defense team in the House twice under President Trump when the Democrats used it for raw partisan political purposes, and I decried that at each step of the way. The reason is because the impeachment power that we have in the Constitution, in the House specifically, next to a declaration of war, you could argue it's the heaviest power that we have, and it cannot be wielded for political purposes. So I have been very consistent, intellectually consistent in this, and persistent that we have to follow due process and we have to follow the law. That means following our obligation under the Constitution and doing appropriate investigations in the right way, at the right pace, so that the evidence comes in and we follow the evidence where it leads. We follow the truth where it leads. So as we stand here today, I'm not predetermined that, but I do believe that very soon we are coming to a point of decision on it. We're in the impeachment inquiry phase, as you know, which is an important step in that due process. And what you're seeing right now, although a lot of American people are anxious about this, many Republicans across the country are anxious to get to the end point on this, and I think some Democrats want to know how it ends as well. What you're seeing right now is a deliberate constitutional process that was envisioned by the founders, the framers of the Constitution. This is how they envisioned this to go, not the way the Democrats did it: snap impeachments, sham impeachments, and all the rest. So I know that people are anxious about it, but I will say, Chairman Comer, Chairman Jordan in Judiciary, Chairman Smith in Ways and Means, they've done an extraordinary job, very methodically, and I would say outside the scope of politics. They've been taking in the evidence as it goes. So we're going to follow the evidence where it leads, and we'll see. And I'm not going to predetermine it this morning.
Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference today. Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Accountability Committee, who is one of those leading the impeachment inquiry of President Biden, posted today Joe Biden accepted $40,000 that came from a Chinese Communist Party company. Biden's and their associates got over $20 million in payments from China, Romania, and Russia. Joe Biden even dined with these business oligarchs. POTUS needs to be held accountable. That post from Congressman Comer. Wall Street today, the Dow up 564, NASDAQ up 232, S&P up 79. This story from MarketWatch.com. Martin O'Malley, former Maryland governor and President Biden's nominee for Social Security Commissioner, wants to fix Social Security. During a nomination hearing on Thursday, O'Malley said the Social Security Administration is serving 50% more customers and beneficiaries today with the same amount of staffing as it did 20 years ago. He also called out long wait times on the phone and delays in disability benefit claims. He intends to take a data-driven approach to the problem, he said, as well as bring qualified leaders together to talk regularly about what to fix. That from MarketWatch.com. Introducing the nominee at today's Senate Finance Committee hearing, former U.S. Senator Barbara Mikulski, Democrat from Maryland.
The challenges of the Social Security Administration are vast, but the hardworking men and women of the Social Security Administration need a strong, confirmed operational leader, and the American people need a Social Security Administration that works for them. That's why I believe that Martin O'Malley would provide the leadership and the management skills to do that. I've known Governor O'Malley personally for more than 3 decades. Actually, I knew him when he had more law books than ties. When I ran for the Senate so many years ago in 1987, I recruited then Martin O'Malley to be my field director. He was a law student. He was a brilliant organizer. He helped me win, and then I went on to govern. Martin O'Malley also chose a life of service. Service is in Governor O'Malley's DNA. His father, a strong personality who wanted service. His mother worked in constituent service for me for a number of years. His wife is a district court judge. He went to schools like Gonzaga and Catholic U that reinforced, again, the ethic of service to people and making the world a better place.
Barbara Mikulski, former U.S. Senator, Democrat from Maryland, as she said, elected and took office in 1987, retired in 2017. At today's Senate Finance Committee hearing, Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, a member of the committee, asked the nominee, Martin O'Malley, whether thinking about the fiscal health of Social Security is part of the job description of Social Security Administration Commissioner.
Every year, the Social Security Board of Trustees urges lawmakers to act sooner rather than later to shore up the trust fund. As commissioner, would you see as your role in addressing Social Security long-term solvency, or would that be no role whatsoever? Since it's up to Congress to make the decision.
Yeah, Senator, thank you. There's an urgent crisis that we face now of customer service, but there's one over the horizon with regard to solvency. This is how I would see my role in that, and that would be to be an effective administrator, executing the will of the President of the United States and Congress, improving services to people. But one aspect of this job is making sure that you get the best numbers that you can possibly get on the policy options before you in that solvency debate. In other words, Senator Cassidy and I had some time to talk, and he used the analogy of dials. He said we need to have an evidence-based conversation about what the value of each of those dials is as we look to restore solvency. So policy, Senator, is your prerogative. I would not step on that prerogative. I will defend the agency, and most importantly, I'll make sure you get the evidence and the numbers you need to evaluate what's best for the people over the long haul.
Martin O'Malley nominated for Social Security Administration Commissioner, former Governor of Maryland. He was a Democrat when elected, served 2007 through 15. Questioned today by Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, at a Finance Committee hearing. The position has been without a permanent commissioner since 2021, when the former commissioner, Andrew Saul, a holdover from the Trump administration, was fired by President Joe Biden. And finally, with the Texas Rangers winning the World Series last night, beating the Arizona Diamondbacks, former President George W. Bush, a former owner of that Major League Baseball team, posting today, "As a Texas Rangers fan, I am thrilled for Texas Rangers fans tonight. I congratulate the owners, the managers, and the coaching staff, the front office, and the entire organization. And of course, I congratulate the players of this awesome team on winning the first World Series in our club's history. This was baseball at its finest, and Laura and I are proud of this team." Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word. It's free. And get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.